guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope that you had an absolutely incredible holiday season. As you can see, I'm still enjoying the festivities over here. As many of you know, it's approaching my move out day of this apartment, which is crazy. So I've just left my Christmas stuff up until I actually start packing, which honestly is right after I film this intro, so that's lovely. More about that in next week's video. I also have a giveaway in today's video, which is so exciting. I'll talk about that in just a minute here, but today's video is cram-packed with 23 of my favorite DIY projects that I think you guys should recreate in the year of 2023. If you are on the urge to DIY, if you need something to freshen up your space, you need a gift for somebody, whatever it might be, really feel like one of these projects can be a great kind of starting point, or maybe start off your year with one of these DIY projects. Sometimes I create these projects and they just get buried within YouTube, and sometimes I like to just go back and touch on them again, and I'm going to be redoing all the voiceovers, editing them up new again as well, so that kind of feels like fresh new content for you guys. I do have a couple newer ones in here as well, but 23 incredible projects. I am so excited for you guys to check these out, but I do have a little giveaway which I want to talk about, and this is honestly just for such an incredible year. 2022 was truly amazing here on Lone Fox, and it's all because of you. As many of you guys know, I purchased my home this year, which was that was one of the biggest goals I've ever had in life, was to purchase a house, and I cannot believe at 27 I bought a house, and it really is all because of you. I also gave away an entire home makeover to one of my Lone Fox family members, so if you have not seen that series, it is actually a 4-episode little mini series on my channel where I made over the entire house in 10 days. I'll put the playlist and a card up here if you are curious. I mean, that was like a pretty small giveaway, so I'm gonna have to do a bigger one. I'm just kidding. That giveaway was very large. I don't know if I'll be giving away things like that as often. But I do have something really fun for you guys today. I am going to be giving away a frame Samsung TV with the frame around it. So yes, one lucky commenter is going to win this Samsung frame TV, well, not this exact one very similar to this one, with the matching frame, and they can actually choose the frame style that they love. These are from Deco TV frames. I absolutely love mine. So all you have to do to enter this giveaway is simply leave a comment in the comment section below. Pretty simple, that's all you gotta do. You do also have to be a subscriber of my channel, and I will be cross-checking, so if you are not a subscriber, make sure to click that subscribe button, and you can actually get a second entry into the giveaway by simply following me over on Instagram. So if you are not already, my Instagram is just Lone Fox Home, same as my TikTok, but if you are already following me on Instagram, just leave an additional comment below. So leave your first comment as your first entry and an additional comment letting me know that you followed on Instagram with your Instagram username. That's a second entry into the giveaway. And I also have to say that I know not everyone wants a Samsung frame TV. I know not everyone watches TV, so if you do win this giveaway, I have not purchased said TV and frame for the winner yet, so I will gladly purchase you or even give you the money of similar value to the TV and the frame if that's not of interest to you. So if you don't like TV, you can still enter, do not worry. You can even sell it if you wanted to, like, do whatever you want. Maybe in your comment below, you can let me know what are some house goals, apartment goals, bedroom goals that you are planning this year. I would love to know, and let's go ahead and dive on into our first project. For our first project, we are going to be creating some large-scale artwork, and I love this project. I reference it all the time. All I did was I went to Blick Art Supply and pick up a couple of more affordable paintbrushes and acrylic paints, and I mixed them together. I got some neutral tones, but you can definitely do whatever colors you would like to, and I also got some really large canvases. I believe these were 24 by 36, and I'm just painting abstract shapes on these canvases. So I'm just doing large squares, different shapes, different colors, but really making them very subtle. I think that's the key to kind of abstract artwork, is creating subtle color variation, or I should say more so for minimal abstract artwork. Kind of creating that color variation under the same tone is really nice, and I love this one in particular. I added black for a high contrast as well, and I just created these shapes on the canvas. Once that was done, I cut down some 1x3s that I got at Lowe's, and I'm just going to be framing off this canvas, which really adds such a custom look to this piece for not a lot of money at all, because I'm just using some select pine boards, and I believe they were around $8 a board, and I just used 2 for each, so I spent about $16 per, and then the actual canvas itself was about $75. So I would say that you're all in around $100 on this project for one large canvas piece, but it's 2 foot by 3 foot on the wall. So I mitered the edges of all of the pieces for the canvas, and then I stained it using some natural wood stain. I just wanted something very minimal, very soft to go with the color tones that we have. And since the canvas is stretched around a wood frame, frame, you can just use a brad nailer or some small nails and a hammer to hammer in your frame on the exterior of your canvas, and that is how I finished them off. I just hung them up using a laser level inside, and this really made an impact in Marco's apartment. This next project has to be one of my favorite projects of the year, in the top 3 for sure. I actually found this chair base at a thrift store and it was like, I think $25. So I ended up removing the bottom of the chair base and I fixed it up with a little bit of wood glue. I just love the rounded kind of spindle bobbin look. This is actually called a Jenny Lind style chair if you were curious, so if you wanted to search that, it's L-I-N-D. I gave it a wipe down as well, and then I went in with my universal bonding primer, which is great because this actually etches into the surface a bit, so it creates a really great adhesion for your paint to go on top of. So I sprayed that on, and then I'm using a high shine enamel spray paint in black, and I just love an enamel spray paint on something that has detail like this. I just knew with a high shine finish that the balls would catch the light and then they would just have such a unique glow to them. So I used a high shine, and then I actually picked up this upholstery fabric at the fabric store, and it's kind of like a men's suiting look. I love it, and it's in this amber color with this red on top of it, which I feel like is a pretty daring fabric option. Red is kind of hard to work with sometimes, but I knew I was going to use a lot of red in the space, so I went ahead and stapled this around the exterior and then cut slits on the corner here so I can just pull that up and staple on the corner as well. I just think a staple gun like this is so key if you are working on upholstery projects or DIY projects in general. It's great to have one of these, and they're only really like $10 to $15 for a staple gun. So I use that to staple that on, and I actually had the cushions upholstered at an upholstery shop. So I didn't actually upholster the cushions myself because it was like $75 to have them both done. I ended up spraying over the entire chair base with just a glossy high gloss finish, and then this is what the chair ended up looking like in the space. The red was really subtle, and I actually did red curtains as well, and I absolutely love the way that this chair turned out. It is so fun, it photographs beautifully, it's extremely comfortable, and it's also such a statement piece that really completed and tied together this entire living room. Here is an incredible project that you can recreate for like $40, and it is such a cool record player. So I picked up this pressed plywood, which is actually the most affordable. This is like the pressed that no one really wants to work with, but I loved the kind of brick pattern of the wood. I think it's really interesting. So I actually got 3 of the same size, and I'm going to be cutting down one of them into thirds. So whatever yours is, just cut it down into thirds. Mine happened to be 15 inches. So I'm cutting these down to 15-inch sections, and you're gonna end up with 3 of those, which are going to be the kind of center pieces that connect up our entire media console. And here I'm trying to figure out how far in I want my record shelf, and I actually realized I wanted it about 9 inches in. So what I'm going to be doing is cutting 9 inches off of one piece of our wood. So one of the full pieces that we still have remaining, we're going to cut 9 inches off. So we're just going to be left with one actual full piece, which is going to be that bottom there. And then 2 of those 15-inch panels are going to be on the sides. So I'm actually using my brad nailer just to hold it together, which makes it so much easier to drill. So I just added a couple brad nails on either side so it wasn't wobbling around, and then I used a drill to drill through some pilot holes that were big enough for these 2.5-inch long wood screws that I'm using, and I'm using 3 of these on every joint that we're attaching together. So I added both of those side sections, then I flipped it over, and I'm doing the same exact process to attach the bottom here. I'm just using the brad nailer to hold the piece together temporarily, and then we're gonna go in with the drill and just drill some pilot holes so that our screws can go in and without splitting the wood. That's why we drill those pilot holes. So this is the shape that we have here. Now we're going to go to cutting down the legs. I wanted these legs to have an angle to them, so I cut a 9-inch piece of wood for the height of our legs, and then I'm going in and I'm actually going to be cutting 1 3/4 inch in on the bottom and then 2.5 inches in on the top, and then connecting those lines together and repeating the same process but inverting those measurements so that we're able to create these angled legs, which really kind of references a lot of mid-century pieces. So as you can see, the legs are sticking straight up and down, and I want to fix this as well. I want to give them a little bit of an angle, so I just clamped both of the legs together, and then I'm using a ruler, and starting at the corner of the leg, I'm going to draw out to about 1/2 of an inch there. You can kind of see that triangle I'm going to be cutting off, and I'm just going to be cutting that off with a circular saw, then using some of these L brackets to attach the piece. So I didn't have a pocket hole jig at this time, so I was just using a 90-degree L bracket and some screws, so I just drilled those into the legs, which are totally fine because my friend Lewis actually still owns this piece. I gave it to him after I completed it, and it's in his entryway of his apartment. It looks incredible every time I go over there. It just looks like an Urban Outfitters piece that was like $200. So I'm gonna be screwing this to the bottom, and I'm using 2 brackets on the inside, 1 on the exterior so it doesn't show once you flip it over. And this is what the piece looked like. Of course, we had to give it a little bit of a stain, and for this particular one, I'm going to be using some Early American for a little bit of a rustic touch, but still channeling that mid-century warmth that I really love. And something about this wood just stains absolutely beautifully. I love the different kind of checkered panels in here, and you can just see the different cuts of wood throughout, which really isn't desirable, I guess, in other projects, but in this one in particular, I think it really adds a design feature, and it works in our favor because this is a more affordable piece of wood, which is great. So I stained the entire piece, including the legs, and this is how the record console ended up turning out. This project was probably my biggest hit of the entire year, and I love this one. I mean, a lot of you guys loved it as well when I shared it here on YouTube. I actually used one of these IKEA side tables, and I took the top off of the side table and put it on the bottom because we're going to be turning this into a really cute little cat bed or like a small dog bed. So I picked up a roll of 24-inch wide cane rattan from the local cane and basket supply shop in Los Angeles. I love going there. The lady that owns it is so sweet. So if you ever pop in, let her know I said hello, and I'm going to be cutting this to the exact height of the table. So here I am marking that, and next what I'm going to be doing is creating a little bit of a template for our opening for our little dog or our little kitty to go inside of their pet cage in. So I folded that paper in half, and I'm drawing out an arch shape. You can draw whatever shape you'd like to, but I think an arch is really nice since this is a rounded table. So I drew that out just very roughly, and then I'm using a pair of scissors to chop that out. The reason we folded it is that once we cut this and open it, it's going to be symmetrical on either side. So you can just fold that up and adjust it if you need to with your scissors. I'm going to cut these frayed ends off of the rattan, and then we're going to be able to kind of start mapping out where we want that opening to be. So I'm going to be placing mine in the exact center. That way the seam of the rattan is on the back side. So I'm going to be using a pen to mark around our template and then use some scissors to cut that out. Was cut, I was thinking about using this piece of reed spline to glue around the actual arch shape until I freaking broke it, which wasn't planned. I started bending this and it ended up essentially snapping right there. So I decided to go an alternate route and just use some macrame cord, and I just did 3 pieces of it together. I just wanted to finish off this edge here, and it also is a little sharp, the rattan, so just make sure to get some of that hot glue on that edge so it just kind of softens it a bit. So I glued that all the way around the exterior of our opening, and then we can kind of work on the top here. So as you could see, this top that I picked up at Lowe's is not the exact size. It's like a 1/4 inch too large. So I'm gonna give this a really custom look and figure out where we're going to need to Dremel out just these little slots for the top of this table to insert. And I love how this is originally a tray table because it holds a tray, and now it's gonna be holding this piece of wood and almost really look intentionally like it was designed as a piece of pet furniture. So I'm using a Dremel to just Dremel out those holes, and look how satisfying that looks once you insert it. I just think that looks great. And then I'm doing a little fit check here, making sure that our rattan wrapping is working great, which it is, and I'm going to be cutting this to the height. So I just went ahead and kind of marked that to the height of where I wanted this piece to end, and then I'm wrapping this around again to figure out how we're going to be attaching this. And I figured out the best way to attach it was to actually add some of this reed spline on the bottom, which is about 1/2 of an inch. That's going to finish off our edge, but it's also going to give us an area to add a bunch of hot glue that we could glue around the bottom of our piece. kind of see here with the hot glue gun that you can just add it on the backside, and then that piece of wood that we added on the front, which is really flexible, is just covering that up, so it gives us an area to glue it to the tray on the bottom. And then on the backside, I'm gonna be cutting these pieces together at the same time, which is a little challenging, but once you get it, you are good, because this is going to be a perfect, nice little seam, which I'm going to hot glue over the top with the same reed spline. If you go to the basket supply store, or if you look up basket supplies online, this is like a 5/8 inch reed spline is what it's called, and it's pretty affordable, so they come in strips, but I just think it really finishes off the piece and makes it look complete. So I also added one on the inside so the steam wasn't visible there. And of course, in the end, we needed to do a polyacrylic coat. You could stain this if you want to, but I just ended up doing just kind of like a clear top coat over this piece, and that is how I finished off this little pet bed. And on the inside, I popped in some boucle fabric for our little pet to sleep on. Super easy yet expensive looking piece of decor for your shelf or coffee table. So I'm starting out with some clay, and I'm going to be rolling this out into a long piece that's about 1/2 inch wide. We are actually going to be creating a clay knot, which is just kind of like a sculptural element that you can put on a shelf or on your coffee table. I love them, and they're totally customizable. So as you can see, I keep rolling this out, and the best method for rolling is to spread your fingers as you're rolling. If you could see here, I'm kind of spreading my fingers as I'm rolling the piece. It gives you a lot more control. And once you have your piece probably around 24 to 30 inches in length, I'm going to fold it in half, and we are going to be tying this in a simple little knot. So just very kind of delicately forming this into a knot shape, and the weight and kind of the movement of the clay really creates such an organic looking knot once you get it tied as well. Like, how great does that look? So you don't even have to maneuver it that much. I cut off the ends to create the kind of finish I wanted it to look like, smoothed it out, and then I'm popping this in the oven for about 30 minutes until it's complete and hardened. So once I brought this out, I'm giving it a coat of a terracotta spray paint, which also was a huge hit. We love the terracotta spray paint over here on Lone Fox. Really creates kind of a rustic look with just a can of spray paint, which is crazy. And it dries so just kind of rusty in the perfect shade of terracotta. Absolutely love creating these rugs. I've done multiple on the channel. I'm starting off with this Raclev IKEA rug, which has the woven kind of strands in it. And I actually pulled the woven strands out of this one in particular because I just wanted to have a jute runner at the time, and they didn't have one in the size that I needed. And I also kind of like how this jute in particular isn't super chunky. It kind of has a softness to it, which I love. So I wanted to follow this vintage Killam style design, which is super simple. I'm going to be masking it out with some tape, and I figured buying tape at the width of which I wanted my actual kind of bricks to be would be the easiest way to do this. So that's exactly what I did. I think this was like a 2-inch wide piece of tape, and I just cut and created the exact shape across the front using some green frog tape, because once you have the shape fully created, you could bring it outside and use your favorite spray paint or fabric paint to give this rug a new life. So I actually thought I was going to go in with this white spray paint and give it kind of like a tone on tone look. I really thought that was going to look great, but when I brought it inside after giving it like a good dousing of this can of spray paint, I used the entire can, I brought it back in and I started peeling off the pieces, and it was just way too tone on tone. Like, I couldn't even see the pattern at all. It probably would have been pretty cool in the end if I took it all the way off, but I decided I wanted a little bit more contrast, so I went ahead and added those pieces back, and I brought it back outside where I gave it a coat of black spray paint. And I've had a bunch of questions on if this leaves the rug crunchy, and I will say it doesn't leave the rug soft, but I wouldn't say to do this on a rug that you're going to be putting, you know, in a family room. I would say do this on an entryway rug, somewhere that it could use a little bit more durability, and it is going to soften up over time. So immediately it's kind of a little crunchy, but then as you start wearing it out and using it, it's going to start actually softening up a bit. So I love the way this rug turned out. It turned out so pretty. It's in my closet currently, and I love it in there, but I've also done this rug in another pattern. This is a really fun way that I did it as well a while back. This one's in a bit of a chunkier jute, and then my first ever one I did by hand on the same exact rug. These are all IKEA rugs, and I love this one as well. These mid mid-century style wooden plant stands, but the price points are always astronomical and we can create our own for so much cheaper. So we're gonna be cutting 4 pieces of select pine down to 20 inches and 2 pieces down to 7 inches. And this entire plant stand cost me around $12 to create, which is crazy, and it only took me like 30 minutes. The legs are gonna be cut to 20 inches in length. We're gonna cut those on the miter saw, and in the end, we're gonna have 4 20-inch pieces and then 2 7-inch pieces. So on our 7-inch pieces, we're gonna find the exact center, which is 3.5, and then I'm gonna lay on top of that marking that I create of the center point, just a piece of wood that's going to be slatted in there, and then kind of trace the outer edges of that as shown. So this is our little area that we are going to be chiseling away to create a notch. So I'm going to be measuring down how far or how deep I want my notch to be, which should be exactly halfway down. Once we interlock them, it's going to make them look flush in the end. So this is going to be our section of wood that we are going to be cutting out. And the way that I'm going to do this is actually clamping it down and then using my jigsaw to just cut multiple cuts into the piece of wood. This is going to kind of weaken up the wood, and then you can actually go in with a chisel once you create a bunch of cuts just right next to each other continuously. You can go in with a chisel and just chisel away the small fragments of wood that are left. I used a hammer at first to get the larger chunks out, just like that, and then I went in with a chisel and I just chiseled out the excess and just made sure that it was nice and flush on the inside. Once you complete both of your 7-inch sections, they can just interlock like this, and as you can see, it's nice and flush, so that's what you're gonna wanna look for with your piece. Now I'm measuring down exactly where I'm going to want to add our 7-inch sections on the 20-inch legs that we cut, because the legs also kind of create the arms, I guess you would say, that hold the pot above. So I'm just adding some glue to my 7-inch little piece there and just measuring down however far I want it to go. You can create your arms as high or as low you want based off of your pot. So I just had pretty low ones. And next what I'm doing is I'm flipping and inverting the other one, because this is going to be attached on top and it needs to be inserted so that it's nice and flush. So you're gonna need one of your notches facing up, one of them facing down, let it dry for about an hour, and then once it's dried down, you can go in with some pilot holes and secure this even more. So it's a lot more stronger than just using your wood glue. How nice that interlocks. And the kind of fun thing about this too is that if you needed to store this for any reason, it stores fully flat, and then you can connect it up together when you actually want to use it. So on the sides where I put those screws in, I'm just kind of covering up those screws with a little bit of wood filler, and then I'm finishing it off with a little bit of a golden pecan stain to give it that mid-century kind of look. So just going around, giving that a double staining. I did one coat, let it dry for about 15 minutes, and then did an additional coat on the entire piece. And that is how I finished off this plant stand. Here is such an easy light fixture DIY project, and everything's from IKEA. So I got this Hemna light cord, and I also am going to be using a 2.5-inch wide drill bit with a couple of their wooden salad bowls. So I got the large size and then also the medium size. I'm going to be drilling holes in the top of both of those right through the center, and then I'm going to be grabbing some wooden beads. This is a wide holed wood bead. I got these on Amazon, and I'm going to be stringing them up on some hemp cording. And once that's done, I'm going to be gluing these together. So the bowls I'm hot gluing together just like this, but I want to kind of cover up that middle section with a bit of detail. So that's why we actually strung those wood beads on, because we're going to tie them around the center almost as a little necklace for our light fixture. Now what I'm doing next is I'm going to be wrapping the cord of our entire pendant light with a little bit of that hemp. It's really going to increase the vibes. If you don't want to do this, it's totally an optional step, but I just personally feel like it makes the piece look a lot more expensive and like it's from like Crate and Barrel or a place like that. So I'm popping this in with some some hot glue, just making sure it's nice and secure. And then the little piece that goes on the inside, which you would normally screw on, but in this case, the bowls were too thick, so I couldn't really screw it on. I just glued it on so that it had a finished look, popped a light bulb in, and that is this light fixture. If you are a fan of tarnished or aged or kind of antique looking metal, this project is for you. I came up with this concept with some alcohol inks one day, and I love alcohol inks. I used to use them in my scrapbooking days all the time. It's like an alcohol based ink. It dries down really, really quickly, and you can layer them up and create really unique finishes. I do all my DIY mercury glass with alcohol ink, and so I'm using the color Mushroom, which is like kind of a dark, warm gray, taupey color. It is just like the perfect aged metal color over the top of gold or silver. Like, I use it all the time, and I love the way that it looks. So I layered that on first, and once I have a layer of mushroom down, I'm going in with a color called Ginger, which just kind of has this warmth to it. It's almost like an amber tone, and I'm adding that on top of the candle holder. So you can really pop in other colors if you'd want to give it kind of like an oily, like oil slick look. That very kind of burnt copper look you can also achieve with alcohol inks. And I love how I was able to take these newer Target candle holders that I found at the thrift store and make them look like something that I actually got from the antique store in just a couple of minutes. And if you are at all nervous about, ruining the original piece, do not worry, because all of the alcohol ink you can easily wipe off with just some 100% alcohol. You could just wipe it right off. It comes off in a second. So I'm using some burnished amber spray paint. I'm just going to tap this down and then use my finger to add in a bit more darkness. This is just going to intensify our piece, really make it look aged, and you can go in and customize how dark some of the areas are. When you have your finger, you have a little bit more control, and I just love the way that this ends up looking in the end. The burnished amber spray paint is just like a perfect dark oxidized metal look, and I love the way that these taper candles ended up turning out. Swear to you, this is the most forgiving and simple woodworking project ever, but it's a full-on bookcase, and it's actually a really cute, interesting bookcase. So these are the dimensions that you're going to need to cut your wood down to. If you'd like to screenshot this, I do suggest you do so, because we are going to be using 3 2-inch by 10-inch pieces of wood that are 8 foot long. Now this is 2 inches wide, or 2 inches deep by 10 inches wide, and we're going to be cutting our frame of the bookcase first, which will be made up of 2 48-inch long pieces and then 2 30-inch long pieces. Now, because my miter saw is only like an 8-inch blade, I actually had to cut this and then flip it and then cut the other side as well to get it to go all the way through. So once that was through and I had all of my pieces of wood cut, we could then assemble the frame of our bookcase. So this is really, really simple, you guys. I promise you, it's not hard. You can also use a circular saw or whatever you have to cut this wood. Now we're going to use some 2.5-inch wood screws and just screw them right in. You don't need to drill a pilot hole before, and actually these screws on the box say that you don't even need to drill a pilot hole in any form. However, that is not true, because I've split lots of wood by not drilling pilot holes. You have to sometimes, but this wood's really thick, so you don't need to. I added 3 screws on either side to create this frame, and now we're going to create the inside shelving to create the bookcase. So I'm going to be cutting down 4 13-inch pieces and 2 10-inch pieces, because these are going to create these little cubbies that we're going to be putting in our bookcase. So the top and bottom are going to be the 13 inches, and then the side is going to be the 10-inch piece. So you're going to assemble it with 3 more of your wood screws, just the same way we assembled the frame. You could then place your little cubby inside and just kind of fit it to wherever you'd like it to go. I actually created 2 of them because I wanted one on the top left and then one on the bottom right. I'm going to be screwing these in, again, same exact way we've been working on everything. Just 3 of these wood screws in the side, and it's going to be nice and secure. I ended up having to flip the piece upright so I can get to the back side, so I was able to screw those in. Now, once this was assembled and our cubbies were added, all you have to do to finish this bookcase off is add some shelves. So we're going to be taking our remainder pieces of wood, cutting them down to the exact size that you need. So I just used a tape measure to measure, and just again insert 3 screws on either side, securing your shelf to the framework and then also securing your shelf to the inside of the cubby. So the whole build of the bookcase is so super simple, but it still graphically looks really interesting once you're done with it, and gives you a lot of different elements and areas that you can style on top of. So I'm going to be using some wood filler to fill in any of those holes. Just keep in mind whenever you're using a wood screw to actually drive the screw a little bit into into the wood. That way, once you fill it, it's completely covered and there's not any screw sticking out of the wood at all, and it just looks like a solid piece of wood. So let that wood filler dry for about an hour and then go back in with some sandpaper and take off any of that excess wood putty on top. So we're just gonna sand that away. Now, I actually went in and used a black paint on this piece. I wish I would have gone in with a black stain. If I was to redo this, I definitely would go back in with a black stain, but I just ended up doing a black paint, which does cover absolutely any imperfection. So if you do kind of have wood that's not great quality, the knots aren't very pretty, you can always paint it. So I went ahead and painted this one with a coat of matte black paint, and I also did a second coat once that was fully dry just to get the most opaque paint coverage, and the total cost of this project was only $45, but look how incredible it looks. I absolutely love this blanket project so much. I used a super affordable Ingren blanket from IKEA, and I'm actually gonna be cutting down some paper into some squares. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw that checkerboard was really a trending and hot pattern. I still think it's like a great pattern. I absolutely love graphic and linear patterns, so checkerboard, like brick pattern, anything like that is always appealing to me. So I cut down a bunch of 4¼ by 4¼ inch squares of paper. This allows you to get a bunch out of an 8½ by 11 as well. That's why we're doing 4¼ So once those are all cut out, I'm going to be laying them in a checkerboard pattern across the front of our blanket. So I just lay that on the floor, and I'm going to be placing these all the way across the entire front, creating a checkerboard. It does not have to be perfect at all. I swear to you, once you spray this and you kind of see the pattern in the end, you cannot tell any of your mistakes at all. Like, it's really so linear and so graphic that you cannot tell. So I'm popping these all over the entire front of our blanket, and I'm going to be using these little mosaic tiles just as little weights on top of each of our piece of paper, because the aerosol from the spray paint can would just blow these papers all over the place. So these are just little placeholders to make sure that they stay down, but you can use whatever you'd like. Now I'm using the Tulip Color Shot. I got this at Joann's Fabric in the color coffee, and this is unreal, you guys. Like, I just made sure to hold it pretty far away, and I sprayed every single square, but once this dried down, you could not even tell there was anything on this. It genuinely felt like the entire blanket was dyed professionally by somebody. Like, there was absolutely no crunchiness, there wasn't even like a feeling of paint in any remote way, and it's fully washable. Like, I'm really impressed by this product. It was not sponsored in any way either. I love it. So I definitely will be using it in the future. But once you pull off all of your squares, just reveal how incredibly amazing that looks. And even the inconsistent spray with the brown, kind of how I made it look a little bit tattered in a sense, really creates an organic look to the blanket. And I was genuinely so shocked at how soft and cozy this blanket was. I still have it to this day. It's currently in the Lone Fox room at the moment, and I will be using her in a makeover next year. Look of French wall molding, it is a lot more achievable than you think. If you've never heard of miter shears, this is actually part of a breakfast nook makeover that I did this year, and I just loved how easy this was to create. So these miter shears actually allow you to cut down trim that is on the smaller side. So anything that you would use for like wall molding, you can cut it almost as if you're using scissors. It is absolutely crazy, creates that mitered edge for you. And then I just went in with a brad nailer to attach that onto my walls, and I really didn't have to do too much measuring for this. I guess in my particular case on this wall, the windows really kind of created the placement for me. So I was only able to actually add molding around where the windows weren't. So I added a large square in the center of both of the windows, made sure to miter those top corners as well, attach that to the wall. I feel like a lot of people find this to be a little challenging, or they think of it as a little challenging, but it's actually a very inexpensive way to add such a luxury look to your home or your apartment. I consider this almost rental friendly because brad nails are very, very tiny. They create the smallest hole, and I use like one per piece, I swear. And you could use one per piece. You know, if it's a rental and you wanted to make sure of it, you can use one brad nail. It's gonna hold it there as long as no one's freaking like ripping it off the wall. You are totally fine. So I added these pieces to the bottom as well to just kind of finish off the look, painted it all up. And once you have this fully painted, it creates such a seamless look in your home, and I love the way that it turned out. table in the breakfast nook as well, and I actually created it from a bunch of these wooden dowels, which I think are originally used for like closets as clothing rails, you know? So I'm gonna be cutting these down to 28 inches in length, and I cut down a whole bunch of them. I think I ended up having about 40 of them in the end that I ended up working with. So I cut those down to 28 inches in length, which is going to be creating the height of our table. I also cut down a scrap piece of 2x4 to 28 inches in length as well, because that's going to be the kind of center support beam that we're going to be using to attach these wooden rounds to. So I just got this 12-inch wooden round, and I'm going to be attaching our 2x4 in the center of both of those. And make sure that your wooden rounds are in alignment with each other, and I just do this by rolling the piece to make sure that it's nice and centered. You're gonna wanna just try to get it as centered as you possibly can from the start. Once I had that centered, I went in with my wooden dowels, and I'm going to just place them on the edge of both of the wooden circles and just use my brad nailer to nail them downwards. Now, if you have any excess or the pieces aren't cut perfectly, keep flipping and rotating your piece, and always have the bottom circle be flush with the dowels, and any excess, have it be on the top there. So if you need to flip it and rotate it as you work and kind of, you know, just make sure that you flip it back before you add the next dowel so that it's always flush, because the bottom's gonna be visible, but the top will be hidden once we add the tabletop. So I'm gonna be wrapping these all the way around. It took me about an hour, and then I went in with the special walnut stain, but the special walnut just didn't really show up that well. So I decided to add the tabletop instead. This is a 36-inch round tabletop. They're like $75 at Lowe's, I believe. And I'm gonna be finding the inner 12-inch circle by just marking 12 inches out from the edge. So once you have that inner circle, I just kind of traced around there. On the bottom of the piece, I actually added these little plastic stopper legs just so it didn't scrape the floor or anything. And then I flipped it over and added a whole bunch of construction adhesive on top, because we're going to be attaching our tabletop here. And I made sure that the pencil side that we created our kind of guide on was underneath. That way we could center it and make sure it was nice and centered so it could adhere down. Let that dry for like 10 minutes or so, and then I went over the top of it with a stain called Kona, and that's what really created the depth on this wooden table. That's how I finished it off. This white oak painting technique is unreal. Like, I could not believe how incredible this looked in the end. So I actually got this small little cart. I wanted to create an art cart, or like a little like storage caddy for in my craft room for when I had my craft tools by me. So I gave this piece an entire coat of the Zinsser primer to start. Now, I believe this was actually painted wood. Like, it was painted to look like wood to start, which is exactly what we are doing, yes, but our finish is going to look quite a bit nicer, a lovely white oak finish. So once this primer dries down, I'm going to give it a coat of Bear's Rugged Tan paint, and I did this in a satin finish. I think a satin finish is nice because it actually allows the next product that we're going to be using to glide on really nicely. And that product is Rust-Oleum's Decorative Glaze in Java Brown. And now this is kind of like a translucent paint in a way. If you could imagine like a gel stain, but kind of like mixed with a paint. I'm applying this with one of these coarse chip brushes. These are just really the more affordable brushes that you get at the hardware store, just to get the color on there to start. So I'm just applying this so I can kind of gauge how much color is actually going on and how much product I'm applying to the front of my cabinet door. But then I'm gonna go in with a stain brush. This is actually the brush I use to lime wash with, and I've had this brush forever. I still use it. I'm going in and I'm going to start working the product into the paint, and look how quickly it turns into a freaking wood grain. This take me like, I don't know, a minute of back and forth, you know, swipes and motions to create this. I also went in with a broom to create even more coarser grain in the wood. You can really go in with anything that will add texture. You could probably use a fork, but anything with organic, inconsistent texture is exactly what you're looking for. So a paintbrush and like a broom is perfect. I got that hand broom actually at Lowe's for $5 in the painting section. And I did this on the entire piece, painting the front, the back, the top, absolutely every facet of it, and turned it into a lovely little white oak art cart. I've got another light and I've got another IKEA project for you. So this is our light base that we're going to be using. I have no idea how to pronounce that, so please do take a screenshot. I am then going to be using some air dry clay that I got at Joann's, and I'm just going to be using this to create a new structure on this light fixture. Now I do know that IKEA also sells this in a table lamp form, and they also sell it in a floor lamp form, so you can do this same exact technique and create the most unique table lamp and floor lamp. Like if you interpret it in the same exact way, it would just be inverted essentially. It looks great. So I'm going to be piling on a bunch of this air dry clay onto our first light bulb area. So there are 3 little arms that kind of come off of this pendant, and I want to create these very like postmodern kind of cone party hat-esque looking pieces, and we're going to be connecting this up with clay throughout the entire light so it looks like it's fully formed out of ceramic once you're done. So I'm just mending and kind of getting the bulk of our clay on, then I'm going through with my fingers and kind of sculpting this into the shape that I want to. You can use whatever you need to kind of get it how you want it to look in the end, and I'm also going to be wrapping clay around the arms as well. And this process is pretty repetitive because there are 3 arms that you're going to be doing the exact same thing with. So just continue that process, adding your clay around the piece, creating the shapes and trying to make them as similar as possible. Or you could totally vary them if you want to, and then just kind of make the clay meet up at the top and smooth it out with your fingers where it's needed. I ended up using a dowel across my picture rail molding in the living room and hanging this up so that it can dry down for 48 hours or until the piece is pretty light in color. You can tell once it's hardened down. And as you can see, there were quite a bit of cracks actually around the area where the clay was super thin. So I went in with some joint compound and just kind of smoothed this over and almost rubbed it into the clay to make sure that I filled in all of those cracks, and did a generous layer of this on the entire piece because joint compound can easily be sanded down to whatever finish you kind of want it to look like. And so I sanded this down so it was nice and smooth before the painting process, which required just a little bit of prep work. I actually taped off the inside light bulb areas of the lights with a little bit of tape, and then I'm going to be using this matte French cream spray paint, and I'm going to be painting the entire light fixture. And I love painting this while it's hanging up because you can just kind of spin it as you need to, get all the little areas, and this is where you start seeing your fixture come to life because you start seeing less of the imperfections and more of a streamlined silhouette. And I just wanted to create a funky fixture, and I ended up going in with this stone paint, which I actually sprayed from really far back. It's kind of hard to see, but it created a speckled texture over the top. And I did this from about 6 feet away, just making sure that I masked off everywhere around my workstation. And once that was fully done, I let it dry down, and you can add back in the little bulbs because it comes with these little round orb bulb covers, and this really finishes off the light. I just love the way that it ended up looking, and it's just such a cool piece you could hang over like a breakfast nook table or in a little cozy corner. This one's an oldie, but definitely a goodie. One of my favorite art projects that I've actually done on the channel, and I actually got some filming paper to start, and I traced out the template that was on the inside of the frame, so I knew how much of the paper I needed. But I would definitely suggest just investing in like a $2 or $3 piece of watercolor paper. It'll make your life much easier. I ended up using some golden paint, just watered down with a bit of water, and I actually followed this Anthropology art print at the time, which I thought was just so beautiful, super organic. So I actually went in with the paintbrush and just applied paint and heavier kind of hand placement motions into areas where I wanted a more concentrated color. And you can even go back in and layer the color on top, but it is a very forgiving piece of artwork, which I really like about it. And I've always loved this piece. I still have it to this day. Here's a really, really great project on how to turn vintage or thrifted glassware into vintage or antique looking pottery. So this actually was from IKEA, and I'm going to be using the Ben Zinzer primer. This is the 123 primer, shellac. It really coats onto anything, including glass. So I gave that a good coat, let it dry down, and then went back inside once it was dry and grabbed some air dry clay because we're going to be creating some handles for this. I feel like this is such a unique way to make any glassware piece look more like ceramics, and I'm just creating this kind of large large log of clay that I'm going to be forming into a handle shape and just pressing and almost mending the clay into the actual piece. And do not worry, because we're going to be using a thick paint mixture which will hide any of these like elevated points, so you don't have to get it super smooth, but however smooth you can, just try to blend it into the primed piece. And once that handle is on there, we're going to be creating our paint mixture. So this is just a little bit of household latex paint and like a light cream. I'm also adding a little bit of acrylic paint in this reddish tone because I wanted it to be just kind of a little bit of a salmon-y shade, but still on the nude side. So once I got the color that I desired, I actually went ahead and added in a bunch of baking soda, and this is going to react with the paint and create a textury, almost sandy finish to your paint, which is great for that faux ceramic look. So this is going to look like a matte piece of pottery in the end. So I painted this on the entire outside, covering up the handles, and you can really glob the paint on around those elevated points. Like if your handles aren't fully blended into the piece, you could just kind of add some extra paint on there and it will dry down and look pretty good. So as you can see here, those handles actually kind of look like they were on here originally, which is great. So I'm going in with a heat gun and just drying that down. Now I'm going back in and applying a little bit more texture by kind of inorganically just patting the top of it. This gives a little bit of a rougher texture, but here is where we're going to add that very vintage and antique look. And believe it or not, that is achieved with mud. So I went outside to my front yard, got a bunch of dirt in a cup, mixed it up with some water, created this mud material that I'm going to be putting on the piece. And I'm using a heat gun, which you don't have to use this. I also love doing these kinds of projects outside in the sun because the mud actually dries really, really quick. So you can kind of start seeing the distressing that's happening, but you are going to layer this up. And as you layer it, it's actually going to remove some of the mud underneath because the water is just going to kind of re-wet that soil. And you're just going to keep layering this up. Add as much mud as you would like to. You can also use like a paper towel and rub and scuff off the mud in the end, or like any of the extra kind of chunkier pieces of dirt. You're just gonna want to brush that off with like a brush or a paper towel, and this is your finished piece. If you guys remember those tiled nightstands that I made a while back, I ended up actually keeping some of those extra tile sheets, and I wanted to share with you how I created these tiled coasters because they are super easy to create and you can create a whole bunch of them at once if you wanted to like give these out as gifts. I feel like they would be so cute to give out as gifts, and you can also customize them to each person. I'll show you how. So these are 2x2 inch tiles that I got at Floor & Decor, and I cut them down to be 2x2 in a grid, and I actually backed them with some cork. So I used some hot glue and I just glued this on the backside with cork because a lot of coasters actually are backed with cork so it protects your surface. So once I glued all of these down, I just used my X-Acto knife to trim off any extra. I first coated the tiles in a Zinsser primer, which you couldn't see. It was like literally white going on top of white. And then I added this light pink, just acrylic paint over top. I'm doing 3 coats of this to make sure that it's nice and opaque, and then cooling it down, or I guess heating it up and drying it down with my heat gun. Once that was done, I actually got this Mod Podge, and this Mod Podge is in a hard coat finish. So it's meant for durability. It's meant to be washed in the dishwasher. Once that dried down, I'm adding my grout. This is just some pre-mixed grout, which I also got from Floor & Decor. This was in the color Warm Gray, and I added this in all of the cracks just with my finger. There's no need to use like a trowel or anything. Just wipe off the extra with a paper towel. I used some joint compound to seal off the edge and make it look like a thick piece of tile, and that's how I finished off these coasters. When I was using the alcohol inks, how I actually create a bunch of mercury glass with alcohol inks. So let me share with you exactly how I do that. So I found this frame at the thrift store and I didn't really know what I wanted to put in it. So I was like, why don't I turn it into a cool antique looking mirror? So I popped out the glass insert and I'm going to be cleaning that just with some glass cleaner to get it nice and as clean as possible. Now, something I will say is this glass was very like murky. It still had like a film over the top of it. So I'm going to be using this Looking Glass spray paint, and I applied a bunch of coats of this. I did coat 1, then I did coat 2, and then I did coat 3. And how this is supposed to work is you're supposed to flip it back over, and the other side is then supposed to be a reflective mirror. But I think because the glass was murky, it wasn't totally reflective, but I was fine with that. So I just ended up using my alcohol inks to still give this a distressed look. I feel like a lot of older distressed mirrors that you see anyways, you can't really see yourself in. So I decided, you know what, we're going to just keep this solely as decorative and not functional. So I added a couple drops of mushroom alcohol ink directly on top. The great thing about alcohol ink is it actually
is always reactive with itself, so when you drop it on, or if you need to remove any of it, you can just use plain alcohol to remove any alcohol, so you can always start over if you didn't get like the desired look you're going for. But I did go in and add some caramel color and then some ginger colored alcohol ink because I really love the added warmth in the mercury glass. I feel like it just makes it look like a little bit more expensive almost and a little bit more aged. So this is how it ends up looking. It's almost like a double glass look. I think it's so amazing. So I popped this back in that vintage frame that it was originally in, and now it's a great piece of wall decor. Now here is a fun project. This is actually a thrift flip that I did a while back. I found this lamp base at the thrift store for $5. So I measured the height of the lamp base with my tape measure, and I found out that it was 51 inches in length. And I had been saving this cardboard tube for like honestly a year and a half. A large roll of paper came in it and I wanted to do something with it. So I ended up cutting this down to that 51-inch measurement, and then I used a handsaw just to cut this cardboard tube down. Once that was cut down, I popped it on top, and as you could see, this is how it was looking. So I wanted to wrap our cardboard tube in some material, and I knew pole wrap would be the perfect material for that. And this was before I actually did the Architectural Digest project, if you guys remember. So this was when pole wrap was very accessible, and now I swear I can never find it anywhere. I don't know if that's a coincidence or what, but sometimes I wish I don't share projects because then all the materials are gone. Like pole wrap. Just kidding. I love you guys. So I cut this down to size and used some espresso wood finish to give it more of like a walnut wood look in the end. And I feel like a lamp like this, if you were to actually find like a pleated wood lamp in this fashion, would actually go for quite a bit, or a slatted wood lamp. And I love pole wrap because it's consistent with the grain. It's like one piece of wood that's consistent, so the grain actually flows throughout. I feel like it looks really expensive in the end. So I just gave this a coat of that espresso stain, went in with a paintbrush, gave it a second coat, and once that was dried down, I was able to use my hot glue gun to just add a bead of hot glue and start actually adhering this on. The backside of the pole wrap is actually kind of like a cardboardy paper in a sense, so they bond really nicely to each other with the hot glue. So I just wrapped this all the way around, made sure that I had a nice seamless finish and it was tightly rolled as I was doing it. I actually sprayed the base this hammered black spray paint because I wanted it to just have kind of like a nice elevated look, and this was kind of an afterthought, so I didn't have many spray paints on hand, and I felt like this was the best option to go with the walnut wood. So I added a bead of glue around that, which we're going to then invert and place right on top of the base there. And I love the way that that metal looks with the walnut wood. I popped the shade right on top, added the light bulb in, and that finished off our floor lamp. I had this DIY project styled on top of my mantle for like a 6-month period, and every time I would post a photo of it, everyone would ask where it's from, and I actually made it. So I got one of those wooden salad bowls from IKEA, and I'm actually using one of the lines across the top as the placements for my dots, and I just did my first dot and then measured an inch out and just did an inch space between each dot, and then used a drill to drill through. And you're gonna want your drill bit to be as wide as your lace is gonna be, so whatever you wanna just kind of string through here, whether it be the leather cord I'm using or some suede cording, macrame cording, whatever it is. And if you do mess up, do not worry, you can totally go back in and use some wood filler to fill over top, because we will be painting this to create a lovely contrast. Over the top of this bowl, I'm going to be using this satin black spray paint, and I'm just doing 2 coats of this so it's nice and opaque. Picked up some suede cording at Joann's, which is a great idea to use your 40% off coupon on that item because it's a little bit expensive, but the suede cording really elevates this bowl and makes it look just a lot more expensive. I love how it added this interest to the end and makes it more of like a decorative styling bowl, more as a serving salad bowl as it was before. So I laced that all the way up, going around the bowl entirely, and once I reached back to the start, I just tied a double knot on the inside there. You could snip off those strands and that finishes off your decorative bowl. favorite DIY planter I have ever created, and it starts off with an empty paint can and some 3/8 inch dowels. That is hard to say, 3/8 inch dowels, that are cut down to 5 inches and 6.25 inches. Now the 5 inches is actually referring to the height of the paint can, which I then painted matte black. So as you can see here, I'm gonna be gluing down one of our dowels, which is 5 inches tall, to the side of the paint can. So whatever your paint can is, just do your first dowel measurement to that height. And then the second measurement is your first measurement plus however tall you want it to sit off, or however tall you want the legs to be, which I wanted mine to be 1 1/4. That's why they are 6.25 inches in length. So I added on 4 of the 5-inch tall dowels to start with some hot glue. And then when you want to add on a leg section, just make sure that you're adding hot glue to the top half and make sure that it doesn't go onto the leg that's underneath, but you're still attaching it flush with the top of your planter, if that makes sense, so that the wood on the bottom that's overhanging is going to be creating the leg. So I actually just used 2 pieces of wood for each of the legs, and then I added on more of the 5-inch sections as I went around, and then I just added a leg wherever I felt like I needed one. I think I did about 8 dowels, and then I added a leg, and there was one side that ended up having 9 dowels, but you could not tell at all. Like, even when you looked at it from straight on or directly from above, as you can see here, you cannot tell it is uneven at all. So I went in with some wood stain in Early American to finish this piece off, and I just really feel like this looks like such an elevated, nice planter that was really thought out, but it was extremely simple to make, and I feel like the excess leg at the bottom just adds such an interesting element to such a simple piece. And our last project is a little more tedious, but this is still so cute and it's fully customizable as well. So I'm gonna share with you guys how I ended up removing this canvas from the frame. So this is just a plain kind of artist canvas. I removed the actual canvas, so we just had the wood, and I'm gonna be using some of this monk's cloth material, which is perfect for punch needle. So I'm going to be using my staple gun to staple this on the back side. We are basically using the canvas as a frame for us. Like, you can create your own frame if you wanted to, but this canvas was a couple of dollars, so I just thought that it was a lot easier than having to create a wood frame and get out the power tools. So I'm just measuring out on the inside of this how wide I want the front of my pillow cover to be, so I know where I'm going to be punch needling. And keep in mind, if you get a larger canvas, you can create a larger pillow. It's all determined on the size of frame that you have and how much fabric you have. So then I'm going in and creating the shapes that I want to create. I kind of wanted to do this like mountain scene with very organic shapes to it. There was no rhyme or reason. It was just supposed to be like more of a color story. And then I'm using this punch needle tool, which you find on Amazon. And I just went through with my yarn and just started punch needling in this white section to start. Now this is a little bit of a tedious process, but it's definitely a project that you do while watching TV or like listening to music. So I finished up with the white color, and now I'm going to be going in with this softer sage green, and I'm just doing really soft kind of earthy neutral tones for this pillow project, and I'm going to be adding this green tone to the top left corner. Loopy texture that you're seeing is actually the reverse side of the punch needle. So as you're working with the punch needle, you're grabbing the loops on the bottom side, or if your needle is good enough, it's actually creating them for you. But I actually flipped mine and inverted it, so I had different textural elements throughout my pillow. I had some of the more tufted look and then some of the very kind of flat look as well. So this is the side of the pillow that I wanted to go with, and I'm going to be removing this from the frame just with an X-Acto knife, or you can use scissors, whatever you have. Using some fusible interfacing to put on the wrong side. So whatever side you want to have on the outside of your pillow, make sure that's not getting the fusible interfacing. The opposite side of that is going to be ironed with fusible interfacing. This is actually going to hold all that yarn together and make sure that none of it pulls. You're going to then remove any of that extra interfacing, and we're going to be cutting another piece for the backer of our pillows. This is going to be the fabric that we use on the back side, cutting that to the same exact size, and then we're going to be sewing this up. So I pinned these right sides together, and then I pulled out my sewing machine and did a simple straight stitch around the entire exterior of the pillow. Flip the pillow inside out and leave one side open or just a corner, but if you want to stuff a whole insert in there, you can just leave one side open and then sew it up. But I just left a little corner open and I used some extra batting that I had, so I just put that on the inside there and then hand sewed the hole shut, and that finished off my little yarn decorative pillow.